Welcome to Fairy Tale Time. Today we will be reading Little Red Riding Hood. It was a cold and early morning, and the mist was starting to fade away. But Little Red Riding Hood was already out of the door on her way to her grandmother's. Ever since she was little, they nicknamed her Little Red Riding Hood after her long red cloak and hood, which were given to her by her grandmother. She loved the cloak so much and never wanted to wear anything else. Today, she decided to surprise her grandmother and visit her lonely cottage in the woods. Little Red Riding Hood's mother made her a wicker basket full of goodies. "It is always nice to bring something with you when you visit someone," she said to her daughter. It was quite heavy, and when she looked inside, she found freshly baked bread, cheese, and a bottle of milk. "Remember, always stay on the path and do not talk to strangers," her mother called from the window when Little Red Riding Hood was nearing the woods. The sun was slowly rising over the horizon, and there were a few shiny rays among the trees, promising to warm the day. Little Red Riding Hood was humming her favorite song when she came across the big bad wolf. At first she was scared and wanted to run away, but then the wolf was very kind to her and acted like a gentleman. He was so thoughtful that he suggested to the girl that she could gather some flowers for her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood liked the wolf's idea, and as they said goodbye to each other, she skipped off to pick the most beautiful flowers she could find. The big bad wolf was thrilled that his wicked plan worked. He convinced the girl to collect flowers as well as tell him where her grandmother lived. That way, he could have time to get there beforehand, so he could eat her grandmother for lunch, and when Little Red Riding Hood arrived, she would be dessert. "Ho ho ho!" he laughed evilly. After collecting a few pretty flowers, Little Red Riding Hood continued on to her grandmother's. When she arrived, she was a bit surprised that Grandma was still in her bed. She put the flowers in the vase by the window and carefully tiptoed closer to her. Little Red Riding Hood had noticed that Grandma was somehow different. "Why do you have such big ears, Grandma?" she eventually asked.
"So I can hear you better, sweetheart,"
the wolf replied, trying to sound like the old grandmother. "Why do you have such big hands?" the girl continued.
"So I can hug you better,"
said the wolf. But the girl wasn't convinced and asked one last question. "Why do you have such a big mouth, Grandma?"
"So I can eat you better,"
the wolf shouted as he ate Little Red Riding Hood in one big gulp. Not too long after, his loud snoring could be heard echoing through the woods. It was so thunderous that it made a passer-by lumberjack curious and concerned, so he went to go check on the old grandmother at her cottage. The lumberjack carefully peeked into the window, and to his horror, he saw the big bad wolf sleeping in Grandma's bed with his mouth opened and snoring. He quickly came to the conclusion that the wolf must have eaten Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. He decided to sneak into the cottage and free the grandma from the wolf's belly. First the grandma popped out, then closely followed by Little Red Riding Hood. He had thought the big bad wolf only had time to eat her grandma. But it wasn't over yet. The lumberjack found heavy rocks from the woods, then placed them into the wolf's tummy and sewed it shut. They all hid outside, behind the cottage, and watched the wolf closely as he began to wake up. The big bad wolf opened his eyes and with a yawn exclaimed,
"Oh, I'm so thirsty."
He flopped out of bed and walked outside to find some water. He quickly noticed the nearby well and tried to balance his way over. He bent down into the well to reach the bucket full of water, but with all the extra weight of the rocks in his tummy, he tipped over and fell in with a splash. The lumberjack, Grandma, and Little Red Riding Hood cheered, as they knew that they would be safe from now on with the big bad wolf stuck at the bottom of the well. The end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you would like to be notified when a new story is ready, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel.